Well then, for some reason I'm not able to get any feed from my actual microphone, so I'm switching to my computer microphone. But I'm here today and I'm talking about Wonder Woman 80, Wonder Woman 84, which is the follow-up to obviously the original one, stars Gal Gadot and Chris Pine again, and brings in one of my favorite actresses, Kristen Wiig. I don't know, I feel like she can pretty much do anything, but also brings in Pedro Pascal. So as Maxwell Lord, who plays kind of our big villain here, but I mean, is he a villain? I wonder. But we do have those main characters there. But first, I want to talk about kind of what this is. I mean, we all knew that this was going to be a big deal in the first Wonder Woman kind of came out, and it was about World War I. So, yay! I like World War I. That it was actually a pretty solid movie that I quite enjoyed. But going into this new movie, we knew that follow-up Wonder Woman movies were going to all kind of be centered around Wonder Woman at different phases of her life, and kind of talking about like how did she progress to the modern day. And I think I kind of like the approach that we've taken with this. It's a little weird, but I mean, that is what it is. It just is a little weird. So again, I apologize for anybody who, for the mic quality. I don't know why we're having issues with my actually good mic, but we'll be back with better sound on the mic next time. I also want to, it's so weird. So I wanted to talk about the actual numbers here because this movie clocked $16.7 million domestically and $85 million internationally over the Christmas weekend, which is pretty good and guarantees that they are definitely getting that third movie. The overall budget was $200 million, so by all accounts, this would be technically a failure. For comparison, the first Wonder Woman opened at 103 domestically, 103 million versus the 16.7, and 822 million internationally. But the thought here, I think, is that so many people are paying for the streaming services, is that this is either made up for kind of upfront because everybody's kind of, you have to go on to HBO Max and you have to pay for that in order to watch it. Or this is an acceptable loss for the company to build up the HBO Max brand. They actually aren't sharing the exact streaming numbers with anything yet. So one of those is probably the case. My thought is that they're going to make their money back on the streaming services. There are a lot of people who are paying for those streaming services. The question is, how many of those people are paying for those streaming services for this movie? And it's not like how Disney Plus is doing, where you're paying for that, but then there's a premium fee on top of that to watch the new shiny movie. This is like, no, you already paid. Here, there you go. Just go ahead and watch it. So I think that those things are kind of important to, consider when you're talking about Wonder Woman. But overall, it's looking like the numbers are pretty darn good for Wonder Woman overall. And again, they've been greenlit for a third movie based on the reception to this one. So just want a quick warning, going forward, there's going to be spoilers. I'm going to be talking about some things, and I'm going to try to keep it as spoiler-free as I can, but no promises. There's probably going to be spoilers. So the plot here, and this was kind of interesting because I was wondering, in the first movie, they had straight up a god. They had Ares. So I was wondering, like, how are they going to top that one? But essentially, this movie doesn't have, like, a big bad, and we'll talk about that in a second. But essentially, a wishing stone is found, left by the god of lies, and anybody who touches it gets whatever they wish for, and they have to say, "I wish for this." But they have to give up something in exchange. And Diana wishes for Steve to come back, which is, of course, that would be her wish, because she lost him at the in the first movie. So obviously that was going to be an easy guess. The first guy, I feel really bad for the first guy because he said, really wish I had a cup of coffee, and then got one. But I don't know, what did he trade away for that cup of coffee? It's kind of crazy. But Barbara, who is played by Kristen Wiig, wishes for strength and beauty and all these things because she wants to be like Diana. Maxwell, who is the big bad, Maxwell Lord, played by Pedro Pascal, he wishes for to become the crystal itself, to become the wishing stone itself, and be able to grant those wishes because he's, in search of power and success and all of these things that he feels will make him a better person, but it actually makes him a worse person. So I will definitely say I liked it because they kind of spent a lot of time on that first challenge, because the movie kind of starts off in Themyscira, and it starts off with Diana competing as a child with all of these other amazing Amazon warriors, but she cheats along the way, or she takes the fast path, whatever. But it's interesting because I think that she learned a good lesson in that scene. You can't take the fast path. You have to work hard for what you get. There's no easy, fix for anything. At the same time, all it did, honestly, was remind me of the information that we learned in the first movie, which was that the Amazons were like purposefully keeping her from doing anything that would reveal her as, the god that she was, and like they were purposefully keeping her down. So it's weird because they were framing it in a way that this was supposed to be like a life lesson that she took on with her, but like watching it, I'm just like, but it's just another example of them keeping her down. I don't know. That's how I viewed it. It's a weird way to view it, probably. You're probably supposed to look at it with more rose-colored glasses. But after we go from there and we kind of go to the modern day, in the 80s, it was funny because it really was. I could tell that they were trying to model this after the Richard Donner movies, and really, like, it was pure 80s fun. There was like that montage of just kind of craziness at the mall happening, and it was very, very Richard Donner, very like old school Superman movies, and I dug that. And I think that kind of homage to Superman movies in general, I think, was a good way to kind of let you know what you were strapping in for. This wasn't going to be a hyper, logical, you need to be taken super seriously movie, because it was already kind of trying to model itself after the Richard Donner Superman movies, which were, had some serious stuff in it, but were largely tongue-in-cheek, largely golden age, in its approach to the material. So I really liked that feel for it, and I think that colored a lot of the things that, normally it would be super, super easy to just like pick at it and be like, oh, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. But if you really take that into account and you're like, it's really kind of a Richard Donner 80s DC kind of homage kind of movie, you can really kind of overlook a lot of those, weird things that, of course we're not going to. In this movie, I'm going to pick apart a couple of things. But on the whole, I think that main reason there is the main reason why I feel like the movie is very strong on its own. Yeah, so there you go. Sorry, my throat was getting scratchy. So, looking at all of that, though, I want to move on to, for me, so the thing about those Richard Donner Superman movies, and this will be my first critique, I guess, of Diana Prince, aka Wonder Woman, is that Christopher Reeve did a lot to play Superman and Clark Kent different. He had different posture, he had different personality, he would dress a certain way and act a certain way, and it was obvious that he was really going out of his way to make these two different people seem as different as possible so that he didn't get found out. On the flip side, though, regardless of whether Diana is wearing her suit, her Wonder Woman suit, or even like the super spectacular suit that they have at the end with the bird wings and everything, she's kind of like a tall, model-esque woman who stood out. She stands out in every scene that she's in. At no point does she blend in at all. and becomes kind of the everyday person at all ever. She's way too tall, way too way too beautiful. And again, like Christopher Reeve was a handsome dude, a strapping man, if I will. But he would do his hair differently, and I mean, yes, glasses are an overdone cliche, so I'm glad that they didn't go that route or anything. Um, but I don't know. I feel like they could have done something. I'm not exactly sure what, but it was like they kept trying to paint it as if, oh, because she's working in academia and because, she hangs out with all of the scientists and all of that stuff, because of all of that, she's just treated like an everyday person. But she definitely, especially in the 80s, with the 80s being as look obsessed as the 80s were, it would be really, really weird for people to not just be walking by her constantly like, hey, you should model. Like, she should just be getting that comment like every day. Anyway, but I really dug her performance, though. I think Gal Gadot did a great job in this movie, and it was interesting too because I was wondering, they really did a really good job of establishing just how powerful Wonder Woman was in the first movie, and it was interesting to see where they took that in this movie. And because she started losing some of her powers, there was stakes there, right? So that's kind of the issue with a lot of DC things, is that there's not really stakes, because all of these super iconic superheroes, like you're not going to hurt them. You're not going to ever be able to do anything to them. So it was cool to really get some stakes in this movie, because it was either give up Steve, who had come back from the dead because of her wish, but in exchange she was losing her power. So it was like, I really want you to stay, but oh man, like, but I also need my powers in order to save the world. And she did eventually give that up. But I do want to just point out something, and this was a weird thing for me, that I don't know, it was an odd choice, I think, on the part of the movie makers, is that they had kind of a body swap situation happen. So when Diana wished, and we don't actually know her exact wording of what she wished for, she closed her eyes and her hair blew, and then it was like, cool, I watching the movie knew exactly what she wished for. I was like, oh man, I bet she just wished for Steve to come back, because I knew that Chris Pine was in the movie, and I'm like, how does that happen? Because he's dead. It's either flashbacks or he comes back from the dead. So bam, back from the dead. So for me, it was interesting because on its face, it was kind of sweet, but her wish, and this was interesting because the wishes would sometimes have a super negative effect. And in this case, the negative effect is that Steve being around effectively stole this other man's life from him. So I think in the end, she was never going to keep Steve around just because, just because of that. I think she's too big of a hero in order to let that go on for too long. But just the fact that he was taking over somebody else's life because she wished him into existence, and wishes are weird because she didn't wish for him to, like, I want him back, or maybe she did, because again, we don't know the wording, but he didn't just come back from the dead. He had to come back and inhabit somebody else's life, which was weird. And again, I think it meant that she was always going to have to give Steve up. And I'm glad that she did in the end, but it seemed like no one even thought twice about the fact that Steve was taking over this person's body. And like, they made this whole kind of joke about, oh, well, I'm going to wear this guy's clothes and blah, blah, blah. And kind of making fun of the guy, like, the guy that you just stole his life from him. So very, very weird. Also, while watching it, it was so odd because Chris Pine's head is very large for his body. So when he was doing his like the makeover montage of like, oh, we have to make you look as 80s as possible, it was so weird because it almost looked like he was CG'd, like it was a CG Chris Pine head on that body, because his head is just so big for his body. I don't know, or maybe it was CG'd and I'm just can see it. But it was very odd. Like, the rest of the movie wasn't that bad, but that scene specifically, like, I don't know if they fixed that in post or whatever, but it was very odd. Very odd. Anyway, but I feel like that should have been addressed more. But again, I think that since it was always going to be that she was going to give it up and that guy was going to have his life back, again, you can kind of look over that a little bit and be like, okay, cool, it's fine that that happened. She made the right choice in the end, and that guy did not have his entire existence stolen from him. They even met at the end, and they kind of tried to make it sweet, but I don't know. I still didn't see it as that sweet because he was talking to the woman who he didn't know stole his life. So I'm going to move on from that, though. But I don't know. For me, it's a sticking point. But again, so much of this movie can just be, chalked to that 80s kind of flavor to it where, some of these choices weren't necessarily ethical or whatever, but that's going to get kind of skirt under the rug just because we know the direction that it's going. So I do want to talk a little bit about Maxwell Lord, who was played by Pedro Pascal. Very happy to see him in something besides The Mandalorian, something where we actually get to see his face more. Though it was weird to see him shaved, because now I'm so used to the mustache and Mandalorian. So anyway, I thought that his character was very cool, actually. I think that they did a good job with his character. I understood his motivation, and I understood pretty much everything about his character, except for how he came up with the idea to just become the crystal itself. I don't think that there was enough lead up to that and him making that decision for it to make sense. That's not necessarily a huge gripe. Just for me, because I really like the character, but I wish that there was more to why that was specifically what he decided. He didn't just wish for his success. He wished to have the power of the wishing stone so that he could do all the stuff. So it was weird. One of the other things that I liked was that it seemed like what he was giving up for each of those wishes was his health. Whereas for me, it seemed like, because they even said, for your wish, you're going to end up giving up the thing that's most important to you. And what I was noticing was that he was giving up his relationship with his son. That's what I was mostly noticing, is that the more he kept doing it, the more distant he kept getting from his son. But the movie kept telling me that he was losing his health because of that. And I'm like, but is his health was that the thing that he cared about most, was his health? Or the thing that was most precious to him was his health? And it seemed like that wasn't the case. So I like the fact that he was losing his relationship with his son, and that was the kind of the core thing there that I was watching. I feel like they did the health thing to kind of that was probably to up his own stakes and to make him seem like, he's fighting against his own adversity. And obviously he did discover a way to use the airwaves and stuff to get around that, because then he's like, oh cool, and then I'll just suck everybody else's health from them, which that's not evil at all. But anyway, so the last one I want to talk about, the last major character, is Barbara, obviously, aka Tigra at the very end of the movie. But I really love Kristen Wiig, first off. I think that she did a really good job opposite Gal Gadot. It actually seemed like it was hinting at maybe they were into each other, when they were having their fun lunch. It seemed romantic almost. But then I found, as the movie went on, you kind of got that it was less romantic and more that, Barbara was just really, really just in love with what Diana was and wanted to be like her. And what I mostly like about Barbara's progression is that I think that they did a really good job with it, showing it on screen and unveiling all of that very slowly. And they showed and they didn't tell. And that was, I think, key for a character like this. Cause she started off very meek, super funny, but she had a kind heart, and eventually she turns into this just aggro, beautiful Amazonian aggro woman, and that's what she lost. Is she lost kind of her humanity, which is kind of interesting. I think the only thing that I didn't like was when she turned into Tigra at the end. I don't know. It seemed a little forced. I understand why they did it, because they were like, "Ooh, we should have Tigra in this movie, and this is how we can have that happen." But for me, again, at that point, because she had already given up Steve, she was back to her goddess status, and I was like, oh, well, there's zero stakes here. She's gonna win this fight because Tigra is, like a leopard lady, and interesting, she not a tiger lady, but kind of a leopard lady. But I think that for me, I would have preferred if Barbara just stayed Barbara. If she was just like Barbara on steroids, and maybe she said instead of like being like Diana, I want to be Diana, and then maybe that made her also a god, and then that would have been interesting because then it would have been a battle between two gods. Whereas in this case, it was more a battle between a god and a leopard lady. So obviously the god was going to win that fight. Though the choreography on that fight was pretty good. It was a lot of like swinging on the ropes and all of that stuff. They definitely used the lasso of truth like a ton in this movie. But I think for me, I think the other thing about Tigra for me was that regardless of like everything, because I think that she did a good job of playing the villain and taking it seriously. Just knowing that Tigra was Kristen Wiig, it dulled a bit of the edge for me, because when I think of Kristen Wiig, I want to laugh. And again, I think she did a good job as an enemy, but it was super hard to actually be scared of her. I was never scared of Barbara, that she was going to do something, and it's because I look at Kristen Wiig's face and I want to laugh. And I'm not saying she's ugly or whatever, but like, I think of Kristen Wiig and I want to laugh. So that's pretty that. So the interesting thing about this movie is that overall, it's really, really great. I think that they did a great job, again, with the 80s flair. I think that they have a lot of positive messages in here. Definitely passed the Bechdel test. A bunch, a lot of it. I think that they did a good job with, I think, everybody's characterization, even if there were maybe a couple of points, in the movie where I was like, I don't understand why they made this decision or that decision. I think it all led to a great outcome. And I think overall, I would give this an 84 out of 100. It's funny because they're like Wonder Woman 84, and it's just like, oh yeah, it's probably about that. It's like a mid B. That's like a mid B. It's definitely not A. I wouldn't say it's an A plus movie or anything like that, but like a solid B, solid B. But I want to know what you guys think about the Wonder Woman movie. Let me know about all of that down in the comments. Thank you again for everybody who hung out here, even though like my mic wasn't working. I will definitely get that working next time. Otherwise, don't forget to hit like, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, so you always know when the Turnout releases a new video. And I have been your host, Aloy. This has been the Turnout.